Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Joe here from East co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
And I originally intended this to be a two-chapter thing where we'd combine two chapters into one. But I have so many notes. As Dan can see, it's almost half a page. Not happening. It has to be a separate chapter. So here we are. And this chapter was interesting. It also reveals a criticism I have for Dan Jones for this period, but we'll get to that in a minute. In the last week of November 1135, Henri le Premier arrived near Lyon-la-Forêt in Upper Normandy, and it's on the 1st of December, on a Sunday, that Henri died. Now, Etienne was in Boulogne and was to travel across Channel and to Winchester. Well, first he traveled to London to get himself crowned, and then to Winchester to secure the treasury. Obviously, he got forewarning that Henry had died and decided to take advantage of this. And it's very, very peculiar how whenever there was such an event, he got forewarning. Or, like, on the White Ship, he just ended up leaving because he suddenly had diarrhea. And then, now he gets a warning, oh, Henry's dead. There's something a little suspicious here. Now, people will say conspiracy theorist, but I'm actually, as the older I'm getting, the more I'm kind of falling into the camp. The White Ship there may have been some possible foul play. And with Henri le Premier, I don't think there was any assassination, but Etienne was obviously well informed. But the only thing is, he counters this behavior by being a pretty nice guy. So it might not have been him, it might have been people around him. But we may never know. And truth is, he arrived in Winchester on the 22nd of December, was crowned by, and ended up, where is it? Now, Dan Jones here ends up being very dishonest about the succession. On pages 14 to 15, in that he says there was always an element of an elective aspect to the monarchy up to this point. What? Like, okay, to an extent, the English crown had that element, yes, at least in the time of Canut's dynasty. Now, after Canut seized the throne of England in the early 11th century, there was an electoral aspect that came in, because Edward the Confessor was elected, Harold Godwinson was elected, and then Edgar, after Harold's death, was elected very briefly before Guillaume showed up and usurped. So, in that regard, yes, but with Guillaume's rise to the throne, this was thrown out. Guillaume was succeeded by his sons. It is thus very clear what kind of succession is being established here, from father to child. To say, well, it was still elective. What? Where? How? Like, unless Dan Jones was imbibing stuff while I wasn't paying attention. Yeah, no, it wasn't like that. The Capetian line had secured the throne through elective monarchy, sure, but no. Now, Dan Jones is a brilliant historian. He is. But this is where I just think this is a really stupid argument. And this is one that makes no sense. And I don't think anyone can defend it. It makes no sense. Oh, it was always elective.
Not
No.
so much with the English crown.
Well, not so much after Guillaume took it.
Exactly.
After that, it was just, it's Guillaume's lineage. This was made very clear. And especially with just, yes, Henri le Premier threw everything up into the air with his usurpation, but that itself, he does it on the premise that he is the younger brother of William Rufus, Guillaume Rufus, and that he is of the lineage of Guillaume le Conquérant, and that he is also Edward's heir by marrying a descendant of the Wessexian line. So, in that regard, you must be of the lineage of Henri at this point, because he's the last real direct male heir of Guillaume. And even then, since we're now jumping into female lines, you have to basically go through the lineage of. Okay, the problem is Henri tied the lineage up in with the Anglo-Saxon and with the lineage of Normandy. So you have to be of both lineages, which means Henri le Premier's line. But if we want to throw that out, you got to still go with Guillaume's line. That's how it's working, because the crown of England is in a pertinency of Normandy now, at least in a legalistic point of view. Now, to say, oh, then if you want to argue Normandy had an elective system, no, they don't. So he's being very intellectually dishonest here. Quite why? Well, he's very much on Etienne's side, as is revealed in this chapter, which, shame on him. Etienne was a terrible ruler without a claim. And his defenders, which, here's the funny thing. Yes, you have one entire primary source defending Etienne in the Middle Ages. But the funny thing is that, in my experience, you have more modern historians defending Etienne than you do medieval historians and whatnot. Like, to people of the Middle Ages, it's clear that the Fitz-Empress line, the Plantagenet line, is legitimate. Mathilde was the rightful monarch of England. Etienne was an usurper, and therefore Etienne was a traitor. But in the modern day, we celebrate traitors. So we celebrate Etienne and condemn Mathilde, despite her being the legitimate ruler of England. Now, Ken Follett, in his brilliant Pillars of the Earth, showcases that she was flighty and had flaws, depicting her as very much a kind of German iron lady who's not very fun and did not have good policy and whatnot. This is all true. And depicts Etienne as generally a nice guy, but a weakling. Which, also true. So, that novel portrays everything pretty accurately. But it also presents Etienne as not having a claim. So here we are with, well, Dan Jones defending someone that does not have a claim, and he does claim that Etienne had a claim on page 15. What did you think of that, Dan?
It was, he essentially, yeah, he went turncoat. But because all the lords pretty much swore themselves to Mathilde, they suddenly switched sides to Etienne.
Well, yeah, because they didn't want a woman on the throne.
And that would set all of them up as oath breakers.
Yeah, but they don't want a woman on the throne, let's be honest. And I know it's going to sound like there's going to be people going, oh, like you're woke or something. No, it's not about that. I'm looking at it purely from a medieval standpoint. And even from a point of view français, because in French culture we have handshake agreements, which are basically oath agreements. If you break a handshake agreement in French culture, you're not trustworthy. And this is for good reason. La raison, c'est parce que we French do hold oaths in the highest regard.
And it's not like these lords were in a situation like the Japanese Nagamasa Asai, who was stuck between two different oaths, and he had to choose one.
Yeah, although in Nagamasa's case, Nobunaga betrayed him repeatedly. So it's a clear-cut thing that he actually has to betray Nobunaga because Nobunaga already betrayed him.
Exactly.
Here, the lords have a clear-cut traitor and usurper, and they're going with it. Because here's the thing, Etienne's promising them to be able to do whatever they want, and they ruin all of England. Now, on the other hand, in his documentary series Bloodiest Dynasty, Dan Jones recognizes that the lords had free reign to do whatever they wanted at this time. So, yeah, he's a little intellectually dishonest. But when it comes time to actually analyze the situation, he's not. Like, the situation is that once he's... the thing is, Etienne is also helped by the fact that Mathilde in 1135 is pregnant for the third time. She's not exactly mobile. This is one of the problems with having a monarchy predicated around a warrior ethos. Women can't really move around when pregnant. They're not very mobile, for good reason. You can't risk the child. But men are mobile. Men cannot get pregnant. So, ergo, they can be running around fighting and killing while a woman can't in this situation. And Etienne had the support of a small clique. Now, he didn't have to go with a small clique, but he elected to go with such because he didn't trust too many people. Now, he favored the Jumeaux de Beaumont, and, of course, Robert of Gloucester would betray Etienne in 1138. Now, Robert of Gloucester has had a funny history. Apparently, at the time, Mathilde was rather displeased with her brother for sticking with Etienne and actually being one of his top supporters for a few years, and then went crawling back to her. Now, the way modern historians and even modern novelists like to remember him, Robert is the most upstanding, good man and gentle person to have ever graced God's green earth. But in reality, he was a treacherous scumbag who turned on his sister. Then when that wasn't profitable, because Etienne basically kind of looked at him and said, "You're going to backstab your own sister." Okay, dude, have you no loyalty? Yeah, I don't really want you near me. I'm willing to accept you into, you're not going to be declared a criminal or anything. But I just don't trust you. And I'm actually with Etienne here. I would not trust Robert.
Mathilde didn't do anything egregious against him.
No, he's her brother. And here's the thing. The illegitimate children of Henri should have probably gone with Mathilde. Now, Mathilde did have a brother, I think it was Ranulph, who took her side from the word go and ended up almost becoming a criminal. But he's barely even remembered. And the thing is, you've got... No, wait, it was not Ranulph. It was Reginald. Reginald. He ended up, from the word go, going, no way, no how. And he was, for clarification, Earl of Cornwall. And he lost Cornwall in support of Mathilde. So this is a man who was willing to fight to the death for her. But, of course, we must honor Robert, who switched sides around because, I don't know, he's out for himself. We got to respect that. No, we don't. I say, why respect that? The dude turned on his sister. And if anyone says he was playing the long game, no, he was just trying to get in with the court. Didn't really work out. Then he had no alternative but to go to his sister. and basically say, well, I'm the chief uh, vassal here. You're going to need me. And Rabel would end up afterwards serving rather loyally, but he had free reign. He was basically co-ruler with her. And this is an important thing to note. And we also got to bear in mind he was eventually frustrated with her as his co-monarch to some extent, and would, I think, wished for Henri II to come in because the boy had a better claim than Mathilde in everyone's eyes and could be better sold to the various vassals. Yes, but I just regard Rabel with a certain amount of suspicion because he should have raced over to her side much sooner, but he didn't. And there's no hint of maneuvering on his part in any other records until 1138 when he just breaks with Etienne. But there is one event that's happening around 1138. Interestingly, Geoffroy is starting to move into Normandy. So Norman properties, because the Anglo-Norman lords have properties on both sides of the channel. Oh, if he doesn't play ball, he loses his other lands. Suddenly the plot thickens. So Rabel was in it for Rabel. He could not succeed to the throne, but he could be the next best thing and be the power. Legino, Brian Fitzcomte, Miles de Gloucester, and, of course, a few others, Ranulph of Chester, I believe, ended up on Mathilde's side. But we'll get to Ranulph in a moment. That said, Geoffroy would invade Normandy in 1138. No, I mean 1136. I'm looking at my notes. I misread that. Whoops. 1136. And 2 years before Robert even dreamt of betraying Etienne. And the thing is, arguably, probably in 1137, Rabel was probably starting to go. I got to start raising an army. I got to start prepping. So 37 sees Rabel start, I think, starting to plant the seeds on his own side, starting to prepare. So arguably, 1137 would be a response to 1136. So, and thus 1138 would be a response to 1136, as I said. But that means that if Geoffroy had not moved, Rabel would have cozied up to Etienne or accepted his status as an outcast from the royal court for a while. But the thing is, Geoffroy did invade Normandy, and thus Rabel could say, okay, let's start looking at options. And of course, Miles of Gloucester, as to him, he would rally behind Mathilde shortly after 1136 and begin assaults all over England. In 1141, Etienne betrayed Ranulph of Chester for very illogical reasons. And Ranulph would seize Lincoln, and Etienne would then besiege Lincoln, only for rescue to come from Rabel de Gloucester and then Mathilde would gain the upper hand. Now, in this battle, it's funny because you have the king who's captured by Rabel's forces, and you've got the Earl of Gloucester who's captured by the king's forces. And so you have both sides utterly screwed. But Mathilde is less screwed. Now, admittedly, she tries to follow this up, and the problem is that she's opposed by another Queen Mathilde, this one being Etienne's wife. Wow, that must have been very interesting. Uh, and no, I just mean for names. It's like, oh, I hate Mathilde. What? Oh, it's not you, dear. Not you, dear. Don't worry. I love you. I love you. Don't worry. But I hate that Mathilde.
Mathilde, she has the heart of cold iron.
Oh, well, you're on the couch now.
No, not you. It's another Mathilde with a cold heart made of iron.
Or you've got, I hate Mathilde. Why are you teaching our sons to hate me? Oh, no, not you. Her. Like, oh my gosh. This is just, it's something funny. But that said, Mathilde would, okay, the Empress, I'll say, would end up arriving for her coronation and arranging it, only to then anger the people of London by basically telling them, yeah, I'm going to be taxing you all. You're not getting tax exemptions. At which point, they, of course, get mad and say, then
Get out.
Yeah, you're not getting a coronation then, you witch. They probably said far worse, but we have to be polite because we're gentlemen. And she's chased out. And this is the entire situation is just, oh, what was she doing? She was so stupid. And she then, yeah, there's more, proceeds to utterly screw up negotiations and agrees to take on the child of Etienne without having ever met the kid, and proceeds to then agree to trade Etienne for her brother, a king for an earl. Okay, I want to know who talked her into this deal. But, because, you know, like, Rebel is replaceable. Like, I know historians tend to say, no, he wasn't, but he actually kind of was. There's no lack of competent men around her. There's Cléginot, there's Geoffroy. Like, the thing is, these men could step into Rebel's shoes. Now, the thing is, Geoffroy is across the channel, so he can't, but Cléginot's there. But on the other hand, David, who probably could have helped stiffen up her position, has decided to go back to Scotland because he's just looking at this entire mess and going, no. Now, David would later betray her and decide to seize a chunk of the north because, you know what? It's fair game. When you have people this stupid, you should take what you want from them. Which,
Yeah,
okay, fair. I really cannot fault David. Not McAlpin, but, oh my gosh, he's not of the McAlpin line. Freak. Well, now we know which side I'm on in the McAlpin Civil War. I'm on the McAlpin side. But anyways, the trouble is that she ends up somehow managing to get herself also put in the position of being sieged at Oxford after she ended up having the upper hand. How do you even do this? But then Etienne ends up not being able to secure a full victory because she slips out in a very clever manner by throwing a white sheet over herself in the dead of winter, walking, I think, what was it, like 8 miles, and to Abingdon, and then proceeding to flee from there back to her own lands. Now, it's good to know that when she was in danger of falling, Robert did screw all. And when he had fallen, she had to trade a king for him. We now see how loyal he was.
and she could have pretty much held out for more in the deal.
Yeah, the idea was king and prince. But they didn't give her a prince. They gave her some peasant's boy. And king, well, it was with the promise that he pinky promised he would never fight against her again. Yeah. As for the young peasant boy, Even for back then, men are horrified to hear that she had him slain. That was wrong. That was wrong. That was evil. I don't have another word for it. He was an innocent. And Mathilde honestly had no right to have that boy killed. And like I said, I just have, at this point, I have zero sympathy for her cause to a large extent. Because she's torn the land in half, cost thousands their lives, brought untold suffering onto England, and slain an innocent boy. She's lost a right to the crown, in my eyes, at least from a moralistic standpoint. From a legal one, she still has a claim. But, yeah, I can't get on board with her side. And we got to bear in mind, a lot of the men loyal to her, some of them are loyal out of genuine sentimentality, such as Legionnaires. Others are loyal because it's the cause, I guess, from Rebelle. But you've got, in 1144, the problem is the war changes yet again. Now, at least Geoffroy, who had been written to by Mathilde when she was being sieged, had sent 300 knights and Henri d'Eu to try to strengthen the cause. This is a good act. This is loyal. And the thing is, on the other hand, I have to concede to Rebelle de Gloucester, his forces are exhausted, and likely he was pretty exhausted from capture for a while. So, in that regard, we should understand his point of view. And really, this is her mess. That said, mother and son, I think, ended up spending the last bit of the year when they were reunited together, so that it's almost has a happy ending, at least for the moment. Except for the fact that, there was a peasant slain. Sorry if I kind of harp on that point, because I've seen people say, big whoop. Ken Follett, to his credit, and the production team for the Pillars of the Earth TV series end up showing how this is horrifying even for the most wicked of the time. You have Wayler by God who just ends up staring at Mathilde like, wait, hold on, you're supposed to be the good guy. When she says, fine, we'll kill him for spite. And you've got Walter the knight going, just gaping at her and looking scared of her. He's this big 6 foot tall guy and he's just staring at her terrified. He goes and does it while Waylerin basically takes nails, puts them in his shoes, and decides to walk, I think, 1,000 miles? Like that, to damage his feet as punishment because he has truly sinned. And it's one of the few moments where you almost feel sympathy for Waylerin because you understand the peasant being slain was not his idea.
It's no wonder many people probably went to side with Etienne.
Yeah.
Because, Etienne condemned that boy to that fate.
No, it was actually Etienne's wife who made the exchange.
Well, his Matilda condemned the child to die.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I'm going to actually play devil's advocate for Etienne's side. Could they have known she would go that far?
No.
Because at the time, you got to bear in mind, this is long before the concept of, let's say, socialism and communism, where what's the main target? Civilian or soldier? Civilian. Like in modern society and warfare, we tend to go after the civilians far worse than we go after anyone else. And the reason for that is that we've lost our way from Bushido and chivalry. We've lost our way from traditional societal norms of behavior. For example, you had the Bible, for example, in the West, which dictated what you could and could not do morally for a long, long time. And, the thing is, a lord was beholden to his people for a good chunk of the Middle Ages. They are your people. You have to protect them. Yes, you could go around and slaughter them when you want. You could. Who's going to stop you? And oftentimes no one did. But on the other hand, the peasants would sometimes rally, form bandit groups, and just say, screw you. As seen in the Scottish Wars of Independence. But on the other hand, we don't see as much, let's say, knights being unleashed on the populace as often as one might expect in some ways. Like today we absolutely hate morality and the idea of chivalry. We live in a very weird time. And I say that because, like, the amount of hatred against, like, chivalric knights in literature is, it's boring, is what people say. Not exactly, in my opinion, but, like, I don't think chivalry is boring. I think it's actually fascinating. But the trouble is the idea that it's boring and that it's worthless showcases how far we've fallen. Now, I'm not saying this is criticism to my dear viewers and listeners. I am just saying that we live in a very peculiar time when people will justify the savagery of a government or the savagery of just about any kind of person. But we will say that chivalry was boring and that the knights should not have upheld chivalry. They had the power. Why didn't they just wield it? Well, the thing is, if you just went around and did what you wanted, God would punish you. That was the belief. So nobody would actually do that. The trouble is when you remove God from society, what's there to prevent? Like, why should you be moral? That is a very, very legitimate argument. Why should you even be a moral person? If you're not going to be punished for it, what's the point of keeping morality? And I'm not making an argument for religion or against. I am just presenting the situation from a philosophical, psychological point of view. On the other hand, now I'm actually going to praise modern people. I think modern people wisely have progressed in that many people I've talked to will be more willing to say, all right, I'm going to have an argument with someone. I am not going to pursue it into grabbing my axe and laying it into his skull because, that's kind of wrong. So, in that regard, there are times when I think we are better off as we are now. But the thing with this child slaying is that we got to bear in mind, the medieval people thought this was hitting a horrifying low, and we should too. Back then, they thought this was horrifying. She had no right to do this. And we need to uphold that morality because she didn't have any right to do it. The child had nothing to do with the war. Like, there's nothing to gain. What's the point? Well, the point was apparently about sending a message that she was not weak. But here's the thing. Nobody thought she was beforehand. Everyone just simply expected her to say, okay, I'll let the boy off with a slap on the wrist. He can walk away. No harm, no foul on the boy's part. But if she ended up pursuing it and laying siege to the castle that had Etienne's children in it, people would probably understand to an extent as a demonstration of anger against Etienne. But she didn't do that.
This was misdirected.
Yeah. So I do think as a historic figure, we do need to hold our feet to the fire for the morality of back then. Back then, they did not approve of this. Now, she's lucky she was not excommunicated. She is lucky that England was always on the periphery of the papacy, not like front and center for them. Arguably, Scotland was a lot more in their line of sight than England, weirdly enough. But that's the entire relationship of the papacy and the British Isles is just weird. I'm just saying. I'm not saying that to condemn England. I'm just saying, or Rome. It's always been weird. But I actually think that the papacy maybe should have taken more of an interest in England for a few centuries. And the only reason I hold that point of view is just, they're one of the most, at least in the Middle Ages, pious Catholic states in Christendom. Might be good to be nice to them rather than ignoring them whenever there's anything going on. Like, Guillaume massacred the entire north of England. Whatever. He just needed to let it out of his system. No, you excommunicate that guy. No, like I, the papacy failed England at every turn, and I say that as a Christian who, like, I'm pretty much French, so I typically belong more to the Catholic denomination. Although I don't really always like the papacy, because I'm not on board with a lot of their stupid decisions. So, yeah, make of that what you will. But yeah. Anyways, far be it for me to preach, but the entire position with Mathilde is weird. Here, the church did not cease to support her. Which, okay, so they condemn Henri for Thomas Becket, a man who arguably antagonized Henri until he was at his breaking point. And Mathilde goes after her kid, but she's cool. She's one of us. This is so weird. At least from a Christian perspective. This is so weird. And I know it's like, well, he was killed on Holy Land. Yeah, but this is a child. Like, anyways. We get Geoffroy in 1144 recognized as Duc de Normandy. Basically, he took it by force. We'll get back to this in a minute, but this is a momentous moment, a big deal, and ultimately it turns the tide of the war more than anything else. And the thing is, the reason it does that is because Geoffroy, by seizing the crown of Normandy, has basically forced the Anglo-Norman lords to have to choose between Normandy and Angleterre. Now, one pair of brothers, I think the Beaumont twins, did this very cleverly. One brother got the Norman lands, the other one got the English lands. One brother basically said, oh, I'm with you, Geoffroy and Mathilde. The other brother stayed with Etienne. And they coordinated with each other. So if Etienne would win, one brother would be spared. But then if Mathilde won, and these two later became a force for pushing for reconciliation, which I absolutely love this. This is clever. This is how you should do it. And of course, these brothers never... like in Martin's fiction, for example, you always have twin brothers and siblings who always want to slay each other. I don't know why. It's just, I guess Martin doesn't like his siblings. But no, I think he's a single child, so he doesn't understand sibling relationships. Then again, given how much of a fruitcake he is, I don't think he understands any relationships. But Martin's gonna Martin. And the thing is, in real life, I mean, no offense, Dan, but quarreling with you over land, to me, seems, what's the point? But here's the thing. If we're in a war, and it's like, well, I want to secure, let's say, property over in, let's say, Saint-Pierre-Miquelon, and I want to remain on this side, well, it only makes sense. You get my lands over on the island, so l'île, or l'archipel, I should say, and I will secure your lands here. It makes perfect sense. We'll do the Shimazu thing. Fake fighting with each other, but not really actually do any fighting. But, like even the Sonata did this. Throughout all of history, siblings have always taken opposite sides in wars, but typically, what would they do? Oh, my lord, don't forget my loyal service. You got to spare my brother and his family. And the lord would have to actually say, yes, okay, I'll spare him. I'll be nice. This is how it always is. So to any creatives out there, sibling infighting is a common trope in literature, and it does happen in history. Yes, there have been siblings who did go as far as to slay each other for the throne. And it's always been treated and reacted to with horror by people. Family is the building block of society. And I would argue, if you're writing a medieval fantasy, don't forget that if you're going to have siblings on opposite sides in a war, sometimes they're not going to be really at each other's throat. They'll just be coordinating and basically manipulating people, because this is how it's done.
And fudging the numbers.
Oh my gosh, the Shimazu. Yes, they fudged the numbers in the records of their battles with each other. And it's like, looking at the sources, like, how could they have that many people on the island of Kyushu? And they're like, oh, I slew like 1 million strong. We lost like several million in this battle. You don't even have that many people. It's like, I don't even know if they had that many people on the island, but it's like the numbers are so beyond belief. No, they have to, like, maybe they might have had a million or two. They might have. But they're like, you'd have to kill everyone on the island of Kyushu. And they're just doing this over and over in every battle. And reporting to two different courts saying, oh yeah, we Shimazu have been infighting and doing this and fighting against each other, and we've slain millions. And then they collect all these tax breaks or money and other deals, commercial and otherwise, from the two imperial courts. And it's just so funny reading about it. Seriously, anyone who is interested in the Muromachi period, the Ashikaga period of Japan, read about the Shimazu. It is hilarious stuff. I think it's one of your favorite parts in Japanese history, right?
It's so hilarious. And I'm pretty sure there are other siblings that have pulled similar stunts.
Probably. But I would actually argue the Shimazu infighting would make a great comedy movie. Like something like a Seth Rogen movie. I'm not a Seth Rogen fan, but this is the sort of movie that you could definitely make into... Like, this is the sort of event you can make into a movie like that. But the thing here with the siblings on opposite sides in Normandy and Angleterre, this happened very frequently in the Anarchy Wars after Geoffroy took Normandy. And the reason is we want to guarantee both our Norman and our English lands. And, you know, it makes sense. You don't want to lose everything. So that it stopped being a winner-take-all war for the nobility. And they just... If one monarch won, doesn't make a lick of a difference to them. Interestingly, they all lost. And that's because Henri II comes to the throne. And he's a clever, clever fox. And a force of nature. Arguably, probably the greatest Angevin ruler of all times. And arguably, in my opinion, probably the greatest king in English history. And I don't say that lightly. I'm saying that with a bit of hesitation. I think he might be the best one. It's hard to top him. Because Henri Fitz-Empress is just utterly brilliant. I really like him. And he is a likable fellow, if a little cruel at times, ill-tempered, but he's funny. And he's the sort of guy you'd go to work with and have a great time with. Now, that said, in 1148, Mathilde decides to leave Angleterre. Pourquoi? Pourquoi pas? She decides that, yeah, okay, my sons, all three of them are coming of age. Robert de Gloucester sadly passed away, and thus this sapped a lot of her will to fight about this time, because Robert was important to the overall war. He had become basically the leader of the movement. And Mathilde, honestly, I think that all the sieges and the back and forth drained her a little. Where did Mathilde decide to retire to? Well, she decided upon staying in Notre-Dame-du-Pré, and it was a monastery, and apparently it was a small city which owed its entire wealth of sorts to her. And here's the interesting thing. She spent the last couple of years of her life, the last, I think, 21 to 22 years of her life, basically just serving as a bit of a minister of foreign affairs for Henri. People would come to her to negotiate with Henri and just get advice on how to deal with him. Just saying, okay, he has recently broken a treaty with me. How can I get him to uphold it again? And you'd have her like, okay, well, let me think. Did you fulfill your end of the treaty? Remember, I'm his mom, so I'm going to be more on his side. Well, you're going to have to uphold your end. And she'd negotiate with them and play hardball or easy ball. And a few times she actually said, okay, go easy on this person, honey. And her son would say, okay, fine, I'll go easy. Other times she'd say, don't go easy on this guy. He was rude. I don't like him. So overall, she became a minister of foreign affairs. Despite she didn't really retire, she's in a way a co-monarch with Henri. She handles more the foreign affairs. He handles more the internal affairs of the empire. He handles the warrior aspect. she handles the diplomatic sphere. And in terms of chivalry, she fulfills the role of, let's say, the queen to who presides over the court. Henri fulfills the king archetype, just in all its aspects. And she also fulfills a priestly role. So this is, and you can't attack her. She's in a monastery. You can't. So the thing is, and why would you? She's an old woman. Like, and she's the former empress of the Holy Roman Empire. That brings with it a lot of prestige. She's the former Lady of the English, or Queen of England in a way. She's mother to the present King of England. And more importantly, he is also Comte d'Anjou and Duc de Normandy. Remember, England back then was a third world country that people thought of as being not as important as Normandy and Anjou. And wow, France being more important than England. Imagine that. I'm joking. The English fans will all understand that I'm only teasing. We're French, so we have to tease you. But here's the thing. Even the French kings had to pay some respect to her because, Holy Roman Empire, England. She's also technically Duchesse de Normandy through her marriage to Geoffroy as well. The thing is, she is ultimately very important and very prestigious. You are not going to attack her. And she's now helping stage manage kingship. Arguably, Henry's reign only began to decline after she passed away. So it could be that after 1142, when her hopes for the crown were dashed, she was to get some much needed humble pie, gorge on it, and learn, maybe going about things in the most bloodthirsty manner is not the solution. And she often served as a tempering force at times for her son, although I still am reticent to say that she's a good person because
the entire matter of the child.
Yeah, that we do have to judge her on that one. And the thing is, I do believe in redemption, but I don't know if she redeemed herself. I don't. And it's not for me to decide that because, well, like, human being and human being. And Henri d'Eu would pick up the fight and carry on the war on her behalf against Etienne. Etienne would prove very surprised when he shouldn't have been, when Henri basically invades. Now, Etienne at first thought Henri was kind of cute and funny, because at 14 he tries to invade England with a couple of hundred mercenaries. That doesn't go over well. So Etienne pays them off and offers money to the boy and has him sail back across the channel. He should have captured the kid, but he just says, "Oh, isn't it cute when he tries to play soldier?" And Henri there behaves more like Jean later does. Henri completely alienates his mercenaries, completely screws it up, botches everything, and has to go begging Etienne for help after Mummy and Uncle Robert refused to help him. Because Mathilde apparently believed in tough love, kid. You screwed up, you pay for it. At which point he went crying to her rival. And then goes back across the channel, and he's good for a few years. Then he comes back. But when he comes back, he's a bulldog of a man. He is a tried and true soldier. So Etienne really creates his own worst enemy. And Henri doesn't have nearly as much pity for him as what Etienne had for him. And arguably, Etienne could have stood to be a little nicer to his cousin. But on the other hand, given what Etienne has done, who could blame him? He is an usurper. And arguably, Etienne doesn't really do much good with the remainder of his reign. We'll call it reign. And in the end, around 1153, Etienne basically has to acknowledge that it's over. Henri is claiming the throne. And Henri does. Henri ends up reigning for a long time, and for a very long and successful, mostly successful, reign. But that's for another time. And any last thoughts?
Not really.
Okay. Next time we're going to have hopefully 2 chapters, and that'll be rather more exciting, as we are going to get into Fitz Empress. Arguably one of my favorite rulers in history, as he just bulldozes his way through so much of England and France that he just, for a time, it seems like no force on earth can stop him. And then time itself works against him. I'll leave you all with those chilling words and with a reminder to buy my semi-historic fiction fantasy novel, Victor Tempestson. Link will be down below in the description. And at least on YouTube, Storyfire, and Substack. And also, don't forget to smash that subscribe button and that like button, because whether you're watching it on YouTube, Substack, or Storyfire, because, we need the extra subs. And, well, we'd appreciate it very much. And don't forget to have a great day. And no starting anarchy wars while we're not looking.
Agreed.